Chosen one, I know exactly where you are sitting right now. You are sitting in the echoing quiet of a life that has demanded far more from you than you ever agreed to give, looking at the wreckage of your own sacrifices and wondering if any of it was actually worth it. You are the one who has had to be strong when everyone else was allowed to fall apart. You have watched your personal dreams, your peace, your security, and your reputation be placed on an altar that seems to do nothing but consume whatever you lay upon it. You have stood by promises that felt electric when they were first whispered to your soul, but now, after years of grinding weariness and private heartbreak, those same promises feel like heavy chains dragging you through the mud of an indifferent world. You look at the scoreboard of your life and you do not see trophies. You see scars, you see empty cribs, you see abandoned homes, and you see the quiet, lingering question of whether God has simply forgotten the price you paid to stay true to Him. You carry a very specific kind of exhaustion, the kind that cannot be slept away because it lives in the marrow of your bones. It is the exhaustion of being the anchor for everyone else while you yourself have nothing to hold onto but an invisible thread of faith. You have had to watch others receive the easy blessings, the smooth paths, and the public applause, while your portion has been the dark room, the silent struggle, and the constant, relentless pressure to endure just one more wave of testing. You have given your heart, your energy, and your youth to a work, a family, or a calling that seems to take everything you have and offer nothing but more work in return. And in the quietest hours of the night, when the armor comes off and the tears finally come, you find yourself whispering into the darkness, asking why the cost of being trusted by heaven has to be so devastatingly high. What you are feeling right now is not a sign that you have failed, nor is it proof that the promise was a lie. It is the weight of a very specific, very sacred calling that only a few are ever asked to carry. You are experiencing the deep, agonizing compression that always precedes a spiritual restoration in a human life. This is not the random cruelty of a chaotic world, nor is it the anger of a distant deity. It is the precise, intentional shaping of a foundational soul. There are some spirits who are sent to this earth not to merely ride in the chariot of God's kingdom, but to serve as the iron wheels that carry it through the mud and the stones. If your life has felt like a continuous series of losses, it is because you are wired with the rare, supernatural capacity to lose everything and still remain standing, keeping watch over the holy things when everyone else has fled. The enemy of your soul has been whispering a very specific lie to you during this season of deep weariness. He has been telling you that your silence is your insignificance, and that your losses are proof of your disqualification. He whispers that if God truly called you, your life would not look this broken, your heart would not feel this heavy, and the people you loved would not have been taken from you. He wants you to look at the empty spaces in your hands and believe that they are empty because you were not enough, or because the path you chose was a delusion. He wants you to confuse the pain of refinement with the pain of rejection, hoping that if he can make you feel forgotten by the heaven you served, you will finally drop the pen, walk away from the table, and refuse to write the rest of your story. But to understand why your path has been so steep, you have to look at the patterns of those who walked it before you, and specifically at the woman who stood at the very epicenter of the restoration, carrying a burden that would have crushed 1,000 lesser souls. Emma Hale Smith was 22 years old when she rode away into the night with Joseph Smith, leaving behind the comfort, respectability, and security of her wealthy father's home in Harmony, Pennsylvania. She did not marry a celebrated prophet with a worldwide movement. She married a poor, farm boy who was hunted, mocked, and accused of being a deceiver. From the very beginning, her life was defined by a level of sacrifice that was almost unreasonable. When the translation of the Book of Mormon was in its infancy, before there were scribes, before there was a church, and before there was any money, Emma was the one who sat at the table in their small wooden cabin, dipping her pen in ink, writing down the words of the translation as Joseph dictated them. She felt the heavy gold plates through the linen tablecloth that covered them on her kitchen table, tracing their edges with her fingers while she swept the floor, baked the bread, and kept their fragile household from starving. She was the one Joseph trusted with the physical reality of the work when the rest of the world was trying to steal the plates or kill the young couple. Yet, her loyalty to that work did not shield her from the most brutal, agonizing losses a human being can endure. In June of 1828, she gave birth to her first child, a son named Alvin, who died within hours of his birth. As Emma lay on the brink of death herself, recovering from physical exhaustion and fever, she had to watch her husband ride away to New York to discover that the first 116 pages of the manuscript she had helped write had been lost. She had to bear the grief of her empty arms while simultaneously comforting a husband who was screaming in agony over his own failure. This was only the beginning of a pattern of loss that would define Emma's entire life. In Kirtland, Ohio, she gave birth to twins, Thaddeus and Alva, who both died within hours of their birth. When she was given the Murdoch twins to raise after their mother died in childbirth, she took them in with the same fierce maternal devotion, only to watch one of them, little 11-month-old Joseph, die of exposure after a mob dragged her husband from his bed in the dead of night, tarred and feathered him, and left the infant exposed to the freezing night air. Years later, in Nauvoo, she would bury yet another infant son, Don Carlos, and another baby who died at birth. Out of the 11 children Emma bore or adopted, only 5 lived to adulthood. She spent her prime years digging graves in the cold earth of New York, Ohio, Missouri, and Illinois, burying her heart over and over again while she tried to maintain a home for a husband who was constantly on the run from the law or held in dark dungeons. Emma did not just lose her children. She lost her safety, her homes, and her reputation. She was driven from Ohio by apostate mobs, and she was forced to flee the state of Missouri in the dead of winter in early 1839 while her husband lay in the freezing, subterranean cell of Liberty Jail. She walked across the frozen Mississippi River on foot, carrying 4 young children clinging to her heavy winter skirts, with the priceless manuscript of Joseph's translation of the Bible stitched into the lining of her undergarments to keep it from being destroyed by the militia. She was a woman of refined tastes, raised to expect a life of dignity. Yet she spent her life in log cabins, temporary sod houses, and crowded rooms, constantly sharing her meager space with strangers, converts, and the sick. She watched the man she loved be dragged away to prison dozens of times, never knowing if he would return alive, until finally, on a hot June afternoon in 1844, his lifeless, bullet-ridden body was brought back to Nauvoo in a wagon. Yet, in July of 1830, when the church was only a few months old and the persecution was already rising like a flood, God spoke directly to Emma in a revelation that remains one of the most tender, personal, and demanding texts in all of modern Scripture. In section 25 of the Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord did not promise Emma that her life would be easy, nor did he promise that her children would live or that her home would be secure. Instead, he called her by a title that heaven had reserved for her from the foundation of the world, an elect lady, whom I have called. He told her to murmur not because of the things she had not seen, meaning the physical plates that others were allowed to witness, because her calling was not to see the external glory, but to sustain the internal weight of the work. God told Emma in that revelation that her soul should delight in her husband, and the glory which shall come upon him. He commanded her to be a comfort unto him, in his afflictions with consoling words, in the spirit of meekness. He gave her the sacred assignment to make a selection of sacred hymns, declaring that my soul delighteth in the song of the heart. Yea, the song of the righteous is a prayer unto me, and it shall be answered with a blessing upon their heads. God did not look at Emma's grief and offer her a cheap escape. He looked at her grief and offered her a partnership. He treated her not as an accessory to Joseph's prophetic calling, but as a co-architect of the restoration, whose specific labor of writing, comforting, selecting, and sustaining was just as essential to the survival of the kingdom as the translation of the plates itself. The profound truth of Emma's life is that she remained true to what she had seen, even when she could not remain aligned with the physical institution that grew out of it. When the church fractured after Joseph's death, and the Great Migration went west under Brigham Young, Emma made the agonizing, conscious choice to remain in Nauvoo. She could not bring herself to abandon the graves of her children, her husband, and her mother-in-law. She stayed in the quiet, empty streets of a city that had once been filled with tens of thousands of saints, raising her remaining children in poverty, facing the suspicion of those who had gone west and the hostility of the locals who remained. Yet, until the very day she died in 1879, Emma never denied the divinity of the work she had helped birth. In her final years, she sat down with her son, Joseph Smith III, and left her last testimony. She spoke of the early days in Harmony, describing how she sat at the table, writing the characters as Joseph translated, with no screen between them. She declared that her husband was a prophet of God, that the Book of Mormon was of divine origin, and that no man of his education could have written such a book without the inspiration of the Almighty. She had lost her husband, her children, her home, her wealth, and her standing among the people who had once revered her, but she did not lose her witness. She remained faithful to the reality of what she had touched, what she had written, and what she had known to be true in the quiet spaces of her youth. Her sacrifice was not rewarded with the praise of the saints in Utah or the honors of the world, but it was recorded in the halls of heaven, where every tear she shed over the graves of her babies was kept in a bottle. This is the principle that explains the very structure of your life right now. Heaven does not measure the success of a chosen vessel by the visible wealth they accumulate, the ease of their journey, or the applause of the crowd. Heaven measures your calling by what you are willing to hold when everything else is falling apart. There is a specific kind of spiritual authority that can only be forged in the fire of loss, an authority that cannot be bought, cannot be taught, and cannot be counterfeited. When you are asked to give up things that others are allowed to keep, it is not because God is punishing you, but because He is qualifying you to be a sanctuary for others when their own storms arrive. Your unseen labor, your quiet endurance, and the tears you have wept over the promises you thought were dead are all part of a sacred ledger that is being kept by the only one whose opinion actually matters. You have been looking at your life through the lens of human history, which often forgets the scribes, the mothers, the widows, and the silent pillars who made the work possible. But God does not read history the way men write it. He does not overlook the one who stayed behind to guard the graves, nor does He forget the one who carried the manuscript across the ice when the men were locked in prison. Every moment you have spent holding your family together, every hour you have spent working a job that did not honor your gifts, every quiet sacrifice you made to keep your integrity intact when it would have been so easy to sell out, all of it has been seen, named, and recorded by the Creator of the universe. Your elect status is not determined by your comfort. It is proven by your capacity to remain true in the dark. Chosen one, it is time for you to lift up your head and recognize the royalty of the calling you are carrying. You are not a victim of your circumstances. You are an elect soul who was trusted with a portion of the cross because God knew you had the back to bear it. The dry season you are in is not your final chapter, and the losses you have suffered are not the end of your story. They are the empty spaces that are being prepared to receive a weight of glory that will make every mile of this road look like a small and light affliction. The work you have done in secret is about to be vindicated in the light, and the peace that has eluded you for so long is coming back to your soul with a deep, settling power that no storm will ever be able to shake. Let the weight of your past losses fall from your shoulders today, and step into the quiet, unshakable confidence of someone who has nothing left to fear because they have already survived the worst the enemy could throw at them. You have been tested, you have been pressed, and you have been proven. Your loyalty to the light when you were surrounded by darkness has been registered in the heavens, and the reward of your faithfulness is coming from the hand of the Lord Himself. You do not need the acknowledgement of the crowd, nor do you need the validation of the institutions that failed to see your worth. You only need to stand in the truth of who you are, a chosen, covenant-keeping vessel whose foundations are built on rock that no flood can wash away. Now, let these words settle deep into your spirit as we make this declaration of truth together. I release the lie that my losses are my disqualification and that my silent suffering has been in vain. I declare that every tear I have shed in the dark has been seen, and every sacrifice I have made has been recorded in the ledger of heaven. I am not forgotten, I am not abandoned, and I am not defined by the things that have been taken from me. Like Emma, I have the spiritual grit to remain true to what I have seen, even when the path is lonely and the storm is loud. My loyalty is not to the applause of the world or the comfort of an easy life, but to the sacred trust that God has placed in my hands. I am an elect soul, called and prepared for this hour, and I possess the strength to hold the ground I have been given. My character has been forged in the fire, my witness is unshakable, and my survival is guaranteed by the one who called me. What I have given has been seen, and what I have lost will be restored with an eternal weight of glory that no mortal hand can measure. I step into my calling with my head held high, knowing that the harvest is sure and my anchor holds.